Beautiful day today in Dallas. Good to have you here. This is a great event, and I'm a huge fan of everything that EarthX does, and it's an honor to be here with some really great panelists who are going to have an interesting discussion. But I just wanted to say thank you all for being here, and thank you for the good work that this organization does. My name is David Hamilton. I lead National Security Economic Strategy at the University of North Texas. I've had the privilege of working with Trammell and EarthX. And it was actually 2 years ago today on this stage that we honored Jeff Skunk Baxter with the Hedy Lamarr Award. How many people here know who Hedy Lamarr was? There you go. So I'm going to get into his background and the background of my colleagues here in a second, but I've had a long history, and this is a great organization. And Jeff, I'd like to start with you. I'm going to ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves a little bit. But I just want to say a few things. I've known Jeff for a number of years, and he is amazing, very giving of his time, his energy, and his wisdom, working in national security, working as an advisor to a number of organizations. He has a background in missile defense and nuclear energy, cybersecurity, and other advanced technologies. Works with the Potomac Institute, but I'll ask him to introduce himself in a second. But I also have Rusty Braziel and John DeBar here. I'm going to ask each of them to give a little introduction to themselves. But ultimately, we're going to be talking about the shocks that we're dealing with the Iran war, and also maybe in a broader context. But if each of you would just a very high-level introduction of yourselves and your backgrounds. If you would, Jeff?
Well, you're very kind.
I steal the thunder a little bit, but there's more.
Spent 45 years in the rock and roll business, making enough money so I can work for the government. I'm not going to buy a condo off that. Anyway, I guess I've spent many years in the intelligence community, working for the Department of, what is now the Department of War. That was with Los Angeles Police Department's anti-terrorism division, so have a kind of a broad spectrum of dealing with unconventional warfare, and had moved into missile defense, and then spending a lot of time dealing with space. And you can't even fill your gas tank if the satellites aren't working, so people don't really think about it, but space touches every corner of your life. So anyway, that's basically what I've been doing for a bunch of years.
Okay, Rusty?
I'm Rusty Braziel. I'm founder and chairman of a company in Houston, RBN Energy. We're an energy analytics company, which basically means we do data and we do analysis for energy markets. And we'd like to believe that the information that we provide makes energy markets more efficient and really work better. And when I'm saying energy, I'm talking crude oil, natural gas liquids, renewables, that sort of thing. I spent a lot of my career as an energy trader, running energy trading operations. Also ran a couple of energy software companies, and I started my career as a computer programmer, and I spent a number of years as a rock musician, and so that's the way I became familiar with what Jeff does.
John?
I'm John DeBar. I'm the executive director of the National Petroleum Council. That is a federal advisory committee to the Department of Energy on energy policy with a nexus on oil and gas. Rusty is a member of the council. We have 185 members. About half of them are oil and gas industry professionals. The other half are really knowledgeable people about energy that give of their time to help the government develop good energy policy. My short form resume, 10 years in a hard hat and coveralls doing offshore projects, 15 years in the former Soviet Union doing oil and gas projects, president of a tanker company, lobbyist in DC, alternate energy policy guy, and now with the council.
Thank you, John. So we're here to talk to a certain extent around the Iran shock that we're dealing with in terms of energy. But Jeff, I think it would be good to sort of frame this discussion with the idea that we have been at war and in conflict with a number of countries for a number of years. That conflict is not new, and this is something that we're going to need to be able to deal with not only today, but into the future. And we need to learn the lessons about how to protect ourselves, right, from these sorts of shocks, and how important energy is in the waging of war, and how it is impacting some of our near-peer adversaries. So if you would talk a little bit about China, some of the other things that you speak on quite a bit, and how it relates today with regard to this topic and energy.
Well, of all the major powers, we're the one major power that has not been on a war footing since World War II. The Russians were on a war footing the day after World War II was finished, and China declared war on the United States in a secret meeting in 1979. And China has spent billions of dollars making sure that the American population does not know that we are at war with China. And basically, everybody's on a war footing. I mean, Russia now is on an absolute war footing. Their whole economy is geared towards the military. And the problem is, it's simple and complex at the same time. If you're going to protect yourself, you have to design a system that allows you, frankly, to do that. And yes, we have nuclear weapons. We have a very strong military, which certainly has showed their capability. But it's a long-term strategy. And to move the noodle of a nation, you have to have the population behind you. And right now, most people are so busy working on Candy Crush and working on, trying to get the pronouns right. And listen, I'm not trying to be, personally, insulting anybody, but the priorities need to change. The only way this country is going to survive is if we get into the game with both feet. And right now, we're not. I mean, again, everybody's priorities are so strange. And politically, we have become a nation of tribes. It used to be e pluribus unum. Now it's not that anymore. It's tribes playing a zero-sum game, thinking that after World War II, that the United States is going to be sort of immortal, that it will never, everything will be hunky-dory until the 12th of never. That's just not true. Anybody here familiar with George Santayana? He was the man who came up with the saying that those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. And that's what's happening right now to this country. We are not ready. I mean, we should have had a distributed energy grid years ago when we had the technology, when we had the money, and we had the capability. It's all wonderful to go out and say, oh yeah, we need solar power and we need all this, but if you can't plug into the grid and actually deliver that energy, it all becomes kind of an exercise. So we're in a situation right now where it's so scattered and it's virtually impossible to do what we need to do. Hopefully my colleagues here will have some solutions to that problem and some comments to make on it. But just understand one thing, that we are at war. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but we are at war. And I'm not talking about the war with Iran. I'm talking about with the major peer adversaries in our world. So I'll hand that over to you guys.
So if I may really quick, I have to speak on that. I speak a lot of times on the notion that partisanship is the single existential threat we face. That if we cannot come together as a country, as a culture, as a society, not only in America, but along with our allies, we can't solve the big issues that face us. And there are a number of these issues. Our near-peer adversaries believe they're at war with us. We like to prefer to believe they're not. You and I, no, we're not. We've spoken on that. There are some very significant, important, critical issues that we need to focus on, and our society is distracted. We spend a lot of time on things that are nice to have, et cetera, but not absolutely critical. And no civilization lasts forever, right? We agree on that, right? America will no longer at some point be the strongest military, political, and economic power in the world. That will happen someday. We just like to forestall that as long as possible. And unless we focus on these big, key, critical issues, et cetera, and put those less important things aside and come together, we can't solve them. And energy is one of those key things. You talk about the ability for us to communicate, our satellite space being so critical. There are a handful of these things, but I would argue energy, along with the food supply, energy is the single biggest thing we face in terms of our long-term survival and the survival of the planet. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our friends who've spent years and years in this industry, and turn it over, et cetera, with regard to you and how this is impacting you all and how you see things.
The good news, Jeff, is that we've got a little time because of something called shale. So shale happened, and now we're an exporter of energy, which means that we don't have the same kind of impact from the conflicts that are going on in the world because we need to import a lot of crude. We still import a lot of crude, but we don't have to. And the important thing is that the shale revolution put the United States in a position where we've at least got the time to address some of the issues that you've been talking about. So that's a good spin on things. I don't know. What do you think, John?
Yeah, the other advantage that we have in this country is that we've got a fair bit of energy infrastructure, but some of it's old. Some of it is bottlenecked. Some of it is unable to deliver energy cost effectively to the end users, the consumers and the industries that need energy. So, a big part of the work that the council has done and we continue to work on is how do we build stuff in America with a focus on energy infrastructure? And that's an area that we really think needs a lot more focus and is a great opportunity for bipartisan work, which can talk about more.
So I founded something called the Small Wind and Solar Institute almost 25, 30 years ago. I'm a fan. I like vertical axis wind turbines in particular. I have a design for it, all this kind of stuff. Love that. The point about practicality, though, matters. Can we plug it into the grid? And like it or not, fossil fuels are absolutely critical to our economies and to our societies around the world. We have to get better and more efficient at that while we try to develop things like small modular reactors, nuclear reactors, et cetera, right? So I think everyone here in this room would agree there's a place for all of these things, and we would love to see us move towards greener technologies, whatever those are, even though some of them have some challenges, right? Between now and then, we're faced with the reality that we have to get more focused and efficient, and our infrastructure is crumbling, right? So where would you all say are the single biggest problems that we face in terms of our infrastructure and where we should be making those kinds of investments? John, that may be a question for you.
Yeah, one of the interesting things we learned in our work is that not every piece of infrastructure is a brand new greenfield pipeline crossing unbuilt territory or a transmission line going through a national park. There's lots and lots of infrastructure that can and should be built in local locations to debottleneck very specific points in the energy sector. And this is the important part, that infrastructure should not be subject to the same kind of major permitting process that you need for brand new infrastructure. It's already in a location. People know where it is. People know who operates it. It's usually on the same site the operator already has. So we're really recommending very specific. And streamlining sounds like, well, let's just destroy everything. No, that's not what we're talking about. Streamlining is, did this have an impact last time? No. Well, it won't have an impact this time either, because we're going to do another one of exactly the same thing. So that kind of permit streamlining is a great way to A, put people to work, B, deliver reliable, cost-effective energy to people.
And
So
John, that's really
cutting
happening
corners
right now, right? I mean, there's a lot more incentives and a lot more impetus to improve permitting processes than they were a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, and cutting corners is not the idea here, right? It's speeding up the process, getting rid of non-value added time, et cetera. How many people here are familiar with Lean Six Sigma? Okay. Non-value added time, cycle time reduction. This is a cycle time reduction issue, right? Usually the actual touch time, the time to do anything is very small, but the waiting periods between things to get a decision made, et cetera, stretches things out for weeks, months, and even years, right? So this is an efficiency issue, not really a quality or safety issue, right?
To Jeff's point, it is also a bipartisan issue because you can turn back the clock 4 or 5 years and it was oil, gas bad, electricity good. Well, the council is really taking a completely different view of that. It is, and I'll quote my favorite environmentalist, 1970s environmentalist Amory Lovins, who liked to say, people don't want to buy energy. They want hot showers and cold beer. And that kind of delivery of what people want for the purpose they want. It's available in different categories. And so the council's really been recommending oil and gas and electricity, and we're moving those things forward together.
Okay. And prices are higher right now, right? But let's have a little perspective. Where are we, would you say, with regard to the prices of oil and gas today versus just a year or two ago? Where do we stand, and do we see these prices coming back down anytime soon? Leave that.
Well, we're at about 86 bucks on crude oil this morning, and last year we were in the 60s, low 60s. So prices are up. They are not as high as they were when the Iran wars first started, got up to 110 bucks or so, but prices are back down. Energy companies that are producing oil are making a lot of money right now, and the real question is, what are they going to do with it? Most of the large energy companies over the last few years have really dialed back their drill baby drill thing, irrespective of what they've been promoted to do. They've been really restrictive in terms of what they've done with their drilling budgets, and because of that, they've been able to basically pay a lot of money or return a lot of their capital to their investors, and that's been the mantra of the major oil and gas companies over the last few years, and that's not likely to change even with prices up as high as they are. And the reason why is because there's just so darn much uncertainty in the market. You can't go to your board of directors and say, okay guys, prices are up to 86 bucks. We can make more money now. We're going to make 25, 35, 45% more this year than we made last year. Let's take that money and go drill more wells. It's just not going to happen because nobody knows what's going to happen next. So what we really expect to see is not a lot of change, not a lot of drill baby drill, which means that, at least in terms of the United States is concerned, there's not going to be a lot more production to push prices back down. So bottom line, if prices are going to come back down, it's going to have to happen in the Middle East. It's not going to happen here.
So all businesses like surety, predictability, stability, et cetera, uncertainty makes boards and everyone reluctant to invest. Absolutely, that's true in any industry, and the oil industry is particularly volatile. I graduated with a geology degree in 1984. Oil had got to a low of $8 a barrel.
That was probably a bad time to graduate with a geology degree.
Yeah, it wasn't a good time, and they were laying everybody off, right? So clearly 8 was too low. 108 may be too high, don't know. But for these companies to make money and to want to invest, and it takes billions of dollars to develop a lot of these capabilities, et cetera, right? And then they have to worry about, if I build it, and I produce it, can we refine it? We have a refining challenge in this country. Is that true?
We do, but the refinery business is fairly global. So in other words, I can take crude oil to another refinery and then import the products into the United States. So as long as there is enough product out there, that's fine. Right now there's not, because 20% of the world's crude oil is cut off at the Strait of Hormuz. Because of that, we've got a constraint. But if we didn't have that constraint, there would be enough crude oil and there would be enough global refinery capacity to handle it. So my sense is that, for example, in the United States, there's not going to be another large refinery built in the United States. We've got enough refineries. We can expand the ones that are already here without spending a lot of money, meaning it's going to be billions, but not a lot of billions in order to be able to do it.
Okay. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the environmental aspects of this really quick.
Sure.
The United States, I understand, produces oil and refines it in a much cleaner way than many other countries that don't have some of our rules, regulations, et cetera. That's a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Okay. The ability for us to pass that capability on to other countries seems wise for us, right? If everyone, the Russians produce oil in a relatively dirty way, right? Okay. It would be good for all of us if they did. Ultimately, though, it would be nice if we look forward to being able to, if we're going to provide the energy we need for AI and all the other advanced technologies we want, we need much more energy, right? So I want to talk to my friend Jeff here a little bit about small modular reactors and nuclear energy. Oil and gas, I think it's here to stay for a while. I mean, it's in the ground. It's relatively easy to pull out of the ground. It is the cheapest, most effective way of giving us cold beer and hot showers, right? Okay. But long term, I remember there was a time when they said in my youth that with nuclear energy was so cheap it won't even be worth metering, right? So what are you seeing, Jeff, with regard to nuclear energy, small modular reactors, et cetera, and other ways of generating energy that might be a little kinder to the planet?
Well, I'm going to be slightly contrarian here. And listen, it's all well and good studying the problem, best ways to create energy, most efficient ways to use resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gentlemen, we're one cruise missile and one torpedo away from chaos. No matter what you have in mind to be able to solve the problem on a technical level, your point to cold beer and hot showers, if that is the goal of your country, then you might as well pack it in. Because authoritarian regimes tell their people, we'll decide if we're going to give you cold beer and hot showers. That's not for you to decide. We will tell you what you want and if you can have it. So the idea of leveraging a future on the idea that the population of the country has somehow has a say in the ultimate fate of your country, that's not the case in the United States. Again, it's so tribal. Everybody is a one-issue person. So there is no unity. There's no understanding. If the President of the United States told everybody, sorry, you can only have 2 meals a day, and by the way, you can only have, if we went to a war rationing, there'd be riots in the streets. If they did that in China, the Chinese would just sit back and do what they're told. In Russia, they've already been through this and they're used to it. So, again, I'm not, well, they do call me Dr. Doom in the war games, that's true, but the idea that somehow by, let's see, we'll use modular reactors, we will improve and up the production of oil from shale. This is all well and good. But until somebody actually says to the country, to the people, here's what you have to do. You have to change your consciousness. Otherwise, like I say, you saw what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a microcosm of what's going on in the world. I mean, the Germans figured it out twice with torpedoes. They managed to almost starve Britain to death, and a lot of that was energy. And again, it takes, and I sound like I'm preaching, but I think that every time we talk about how we protect, create, and somehow support creating energy, it needs to be connected with a will. There's no will. There's no interest in will. There's no motivation for it. And, I hate to be a naysayer, but I'm watching this happen. This is beginning to look like Europe in the early 30s. I mean, look at what happened to Japan in World War II. They went to war thinking the United States would supply them with oil. The United States said, nope, no more. And no more steel, by the way, to build ships. And no more food, by the way. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go to war. And that's what's happening right now. Please, somehow or other, as you talk to your colleagues, as you talk to your CEOs, somebody needs to lay out the reality of this. That's it.
So you are touching on the much larger, more important societal questions of and our survival, et cetera.
Well, you can't walk down the street unless you have feet.
Okay.
You can't play an instrument unless you have hands. I mean, I guess I'm getting down to what they call the nitty-gritty, the fundamentals of how you can have a society function. And the society has to function in such a way that it can support the things that you're talking about. I'm not negating any of that. I'm saying that there's something underneath here that's missing. And without that, and oh, by the way, yes, we can have all the oil and gas we want, but all I need is a laptop computer in 15 minutes and I'll shut down your power infrastructure in a heartbeat. Sorry.
So for any society, will and grit matter. Most societies, ebb and flow, and they start in barbarism, become civilized, and they end up in what they'll call decadence. And that's a product of affluence. We are the product of having been very well protected, of being very affluent, having water on both sides of us. Our toughest neighbor is the Canadians, and everybody likes the Canadians. So we're sheltered, and so maybe we have lost sight, to your point, about what really matters, the ability for us to come together, stop being so tribal and partisan. That really matters, so that we can focus on the really critical things. I remember saying something 30 years ago. I said I would pay $10 a gallon for gas or any number, and that's when it was lower, if I never had to hear from the Middle East today, if I never had to hear the headline, from the Middle East today, there's some conflagration, there's some problem, et cetera, right? And totalitarianism, to your point, Jeff, is what we're facing here. There are totalitarian regimes around the world who are like the Borg. They would like to take over the world. I call them Peaky in the brain. They wake up every night trying to think of ways to take over the world. And unless we're willing to face that and do what's necessary, to your point, none of this matters. This is all creature comforts and our lifestyle. I want to make sure that I'm getting at what you're talking about. Is this in line with what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, and this is great. Well, if we had unlimited amounts of oil and gas, where are you going to get your sulfur? Sulfur is probably one of the most important commodities, as important as petroleum. You can't do pharmaceuticals. There's certain manufacturing things that you can't do. I mean, and that's all in the Middle East. That's concentrated there. Right now, the disruption, countries are scrambling. Yes, you are making my point. And gentlemen, all I'm asking, and ladies and gentlemen and everybody, all I'm asking is that every time you have this discussion, you bring it back to the fundamentals, because we are fulfilling George Santayana's, unfortunately, legacy, that we are repeating the same mistakes.
I'd like to see our allies, I'm sure you agree, we have some consternation and some argument with our European allies, NATO, Spain in particular. Many of these countries are still buying Russian oil. They will chastise us for not doing more for Ukraine, and there is more that everyone could do for Ukraine. This war is horrific. It's been going on for over 4 years and the countless losses. But at the same time, we're enabling Russia by buying their oil. Makes no sense, and it's at best hypocritical. So we as Western society has to come together and understand where our priorities are, and that we are on the same team, and that the Maduros of the world, the theocrats in the Middle East, the dictator in North Korea, the dictator in Russia, those are the ones that that we have to focus on, and we have to. I feel like Rodney King. Can't we all just get along? We're going to have to figure out a way to work together and a partner and not tear each other apart, so that we can have the lifestyle, the creature comforts, the standard of living we want, which is ultimately driven by having energy and things like that.
Well, not only the lifestyle, but survival as a nation.
Yeah.
Jeff hit an interesting point about sulfur, and of course, anything to do with fertilizer is another really important aspect. If you didn't have chemical fertilizers, which we've had for over 100 years, you would have 50% less food in the world. People will grumble about standing in line to buy gasoline. People will riot if their children are not being fed. I think, this is probably one of the first times I've seen a crisis when fertilizer started to be a headline issue, as opposed to just an ad at Home Depot. So it's really interesting to me that it's suddenly come to the fore as a really important part of what's going on now, the availability and cost of fertilizer.
And you think it's ugly with oil and gas, the way the climate is changing? You know, who's going to be the largest producer of wheat in 50 years? Russia. And what do you think they're going to do with that? And again, it keeps going back to being able to have a society that's resilient.
It was interesting living and working in Russia. I moved there in 1996, so right after the Soviet Union sort of disassembled, but nothing new had been assembled. And there was still a bit of an overhang of their central planning process, where they would say, you're going to do this, and we will give you this very specific list of resources to deliver it, because we've determined centrally that that's how it's going to work. One of the interesting things I learned from that is it developed a lot of sort of entrepreneurial innovation and resilience at the grassroots level in Russia, because people said, well, I can't get another one, so I need to make do with what the government has given me. And there's sort of the whole sort of, not the culture and the technology and the personal relationships sort of all built up around that framework.
So necessity is the mother of invention. We agree on that. And hardship will tend to make us invent things, et cetera, right? So maybe we're in a perverse way being blessed with this hardship. We'll come up with better solutions, and hopefully we have the resilience and the tenacity to do that. We've got about 13 minutes left or so. I really want to focus, of course, on what you all would like to talk about the most while we're here. I think that's a very good principle. Anytime you have some brilliant people speaking, you should let them talk about what they want to talk about. If there was any advice and counsel that each of you could give our leaders in terms of not only our sort of existential issues that we're talking about, but specifically around energy, the stability, et cetera, what we need to do to protect ourselves with regard to energy. If we can start with you, John, what would be the key advice or counsel? If you were king for a day, and we don't want kings,
No.
but if you were king for a day, what would you do?
The number one thing that I've seen as a challenge, and it hits to Jeff's point about tribalism and factionalism, is to encourage everybody to have a voice, but not necessarily a veto. Because when everybody's got a veto, nothing gets done. And though that sort of creates that tribalism, because I'm going to veto this based on this one thing that my group doesn't like. And so it sort of self-organizes into a veto block. So not to be overly political scientist about this, but basically encouraging public participation in what we do, but not having hecklers' vetoes or de facto vetoes over what gets done. And that's whether we're building a new shipyard to build nuclear submarines, or we're putting in a new transmission line to deliver wind power to a data center. Doesn't matter what we're doing, that kind of process is really important.
Yeah, there was a time when people who didn't know stuff knew they didn't know stuff, and they would be quiet until they could hear from people who did know stuff. And if you all know Anthony Boden, the comedian, he does a great thing on that. One of the wonderful things about the internet is it gives us a voice, right? We all have a voice, but it seems that we live at a time where more people have more opinions on things that they may or may not have any expertise on. And I think we owe it to ourselves and to our fellow citizens to educate ourselves before we veto everything on some emotional level, right? I really would like to see small modular reactors and wind turbines everywhere, et cetera, and I'd rather not have oil and gas if I could do that. But in the meantime, between now and then, I do think people need to get fed. We do need fertilizer. We have to be able to power our homes, et cetera, right? So this idea of veto power, we might pause. Everyone has an opinion, but very few people have perspective. We need to work on everyone having perspective. So I just wanted to echo your sentiment there. So Rusty, if you could.
Well, I'm an energy guy, and like we've said, there's a lot of oil and gas still in the United States. The problem is kind of talking about what John is saying, it's getting it to the right place. So a lot of the issues that we have right now are not in my backyard issues of the energy is there, it needs to get there, it needs to get there before there's nuclear reactors to be able to do anything about it. And that means within the next few years, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. And if I was king for the day, I would just simply say, all right, we need to be responsible about this. We need to make sure that we do it the right way, but we need to make sure that there's not any sort of political thing happening to keep that infrastructure from being built where it needs to be built so that the United States can be as strong as it can.
Jeff?
Well, I think we need a Manhattan Project, and not just one specific, but to include, okay, what do you want to see in the next 30 years? We want to see an infrastructure that's capable of sustaining today's needs and today's resources that are available. We need to have that same infrastructure ready and prepared to deliver tomorrow. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm a big fan of fusion because at Lawrence Livermore, we did it. We managed to figure out using NIF, the National Ignition Facility, how to get more energy out of a fusion reaction than we put in. Now, this was a very complicated machine, all of that and all of that. But in the same way that nuclear energy changed everything about human civilization, this will change everything about human civilization. To come up to be able to have an unlimited power source. So the idea of a Manhattan Project that's not just focused on, here's what we just want this, to your point, and to your point, this Manhattan Project needs to be layered. It needs to have a schedule. It needs to have goals. And ultimately, it has to get to the point where all of this stuff is immaterial. And that's a national philosophy. And that means that cold beer and hot showers are all nice, but you know what? Maybe you don't get that all the time. Maybe once a week you don't take a hot shower. Maybe once a week you don't get a cold beer. Maybe somebody says, here's what we need to start doing. We need to start looking at rationing, for instance, once a week. We need to go look at how we won the wars and the methodology that we use to do that. And then maybe it's twice a week. Then maybe it's, we have a no cold beer month. No, I'm serious. I'm not trying to be disingenuous.
Don't run for office.
Yeah.
They already asked me to do that. I'm not, that's another story. But this becomes a national strategy. And the only way you can have a national strategy is to have a nation. And the only way we can have a nation is to bring the tribes together. And it keeps, I know I sound like a broken record, but without that, all of this is moot. So the question is, how do you politically, and how do you get your leadership of your country to understand this? And I'm Democrat, Republican, whatever it is. Joe Walsh and I were thinking about, founding the all-night party. I mean, whatever. All of this stuff becomes moot. There just needs to be some leadership.
So societally, this is holding all of us accountable. This is about accountability. Our political leaders have to have the right priorities, focus on the right things. We have to get rid of waste and corruption and inefficiency. That's a monumental thing for me. I helped design the safety protocols at Comanche Peak Nuclear Power Plant, and I have a little bit of background on that. And one of the things that I knew back in that day, in Houston, there was a great big nuclear power plant built by Brown and Root. That thing was supposed to cost about $1 billion, I think was the plan. It ended up being 10, and it was five times over budget in terms of time. Right? Small modular reactors and things like that hold out some hope for me, because if they are more quote-unquote cookie cutter, a standard thing, and a lot of graft corruption bloat can't creep in because it's a custom design every single time. I mean, the French have figured this out. For God's sake, the French figured this out, right? 70% of their electricity comes from modular reactors because they didn't want it to be dependent on the Middle East, et cetera. And America just isn't good at bureaucracy. We waste a lot of time, energy, we're inefficient. I mean, the British really know how to queue up, right? Stand up, and they run bureaucracies. We're upset because we're not getting the value that we put into our public coffers to do these sorts of things. But all of this has to get down to, ultimately, to your point, which is the will to hold people accountable and not allow waste, corruption, delays. Focus on the right things and ensure that the taxpayer, the citizen, gets what they are paying for, and have stretch goals. I think you're looking for us to have, like, put a man on the moon, the Manhattan Project, to solve these big existential threats.
Well, and you know that I'm a big fan of modular reactors. We started doing this at General Atomics 20 years ago. And what modular reactors do by you is the ability to decentralize power generation. If you had a completely decentralized power system where you had 5, 10, 20 megawatt acorns, basically, what they drop them in the ground, and you had 7,000 of them, you'd never really have to worry about someone taking your electricity grid down because it wouldn't happen.
Yep.
So,
And we're over the concerns of now of 3 Mile Island. Would we agree?
pardon?
We're over the mushroom. Thing that bothers me about nuclear power plants is everyone thinks they blow up like nuclear power plants, that they become fissionable. And it doesn't happen, right? I think we've come as a society, we're much more comfortable with the idea of small modular reactors in terms of safety.
Well, the Sierra Club seems to like it. So I guess that's one
Indicator.
hurdle would be the wrong word, one discussion.
Well, I think to your point about sort of the headlines of nuclear power plants, who here has heard of Vogtle 3 and 4? Those are the 2 latest AP1000, 1.3 gigawatt power, nuclear power plants that went on stream over the last couple of years. No noise there. Oh yeah, they were expensive. Yep, they took a few years, but nothing interesting from a problem standpoint happened. They're up. Southern Company has them up and running. That's why there's no headlines about them. I'm going to push back a little bit about the rationing part of what we're talking about, because I think actually, Jeff, we can accomplish what you're talking about without having to be overly parsimonious. I think we move the waste out of our process. We're really good at creating a bureaucracy that makes sure nothing gets done, and that we've got over-processed checkpoints, partly because we want to make sure that nothing ever gets past us. $1 isn't being spent if it's not completely audited and double-checked. One pipe is not put in the ground unless everybody and their brother has had a chance to have input to it. And then everybody goes to court afterwards, so you've got this fleet of defense and plaintiff lawyers that are wasting court time churning things through. 80% of NEPA lawsuits against the federal government.
NEPA, everybody probably
I'm
does.
sorry. 80% of the National Environmental Policy Act lawsuits against the federal government are found in favor of the government with no changes required. So what you're hearing is actually the bureaucracy is delivering the right stuff. A lot of time wasted, a lot of resources wasted that could be spent better on the kind of things Jeff's talking about.
And your point, which gets us back to, okay, the will. Mm-hmm. And I think the one extra thing I would add is, to your statement is, not only do you want to not miss anything, but there are certain people that do not want to give up control. And for that is a priority as opposed to the greater good, I guess you would say it. That I don't know how to fix other than maybe there needs to be a national introspective day to figure out who in the hell we really are as a country.
So we've got about a minute left. I thought we'd finish up real quick, just 10, 15 seconds each of you guys, on things that you're hopeful about and things that you think that are working, that the United States, Texas in particular, are doing that provide you hope and confidence that we will be able to have a sustainable, safe, secure, and efficient energy supply. Whoever would like to go first.
I'll go first. I think, again, the energy business that I'm involved in, crude oil production, natural gas liquids production, it's much, much cleaner than it was just a few years ago. It's much more efficient than it was a few years ago. With everything that's happened in terms of green initiatives, maybe fossil fuels are not the greatest thing in the world in terms of where we're going to be in the next 50 years, but for right now, things are a lot better than they were. I think that's very optimistic.
Something that makes me hopeful is when I work with early and mid-career folks, newly minted PhDs, sometimes newly minted undergrads, and the amount of brain power and technology innovation that they bring to the table. And when I see the inventiveness that's being created here in America, it makes me hopeful that we will technology the heck out of our problems.
I'd like to finish with you.
Well, and I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm sitting here waiting for aliens. Because there's nothing like a Martian invasion to get your blood going. I'm waiting for
That'd bring the country together.
Yeah.
well, or a plague, or a huge major national disaster. These are the things that bring countries together. I would love to figure out another way to do it, but I think we're getting towards that moment now, watching what's happening in the Middle East. I think the country, after they get their head out of their back pocket for the self-interest stuff, is going to realize it's going to be all in our best interest. We don't need the Martians. We don't need the major disaster. We've already seen it coming.
Well said. With that, thank you all, gentlemen. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.